Biden's failed leadership are the highest in U.S. history, costing the average American household an extra $2,000 per year. In my home state of New York, people are paying $4.28 for a gallon of gas, upwards in my district. This is up 48% since last year. Democrats' historic energy failures are crushing families' budgets in my district and across the country. American families simply cannot afford to suffer under Joe Biden and Speaker Pelosi's energy crisis any longer. When confronted about this anti-energy agenda, Joe Biden tries to pass the buck and blames everyone but himself. And we will see Democrats try to pass the buck again in their hearing tomorrow, where they attempt to blame American oil producers and Russia for high gas prices. But make no mistake, the American people are smart. Joe Biden and House Democrats own this energy crisis. It was Joe Biden who killed the Keystone XL pipeline and greenlit Putin's gas line, issued the executive order that suspended all oil and gas leases on federal lands and waters, put our national security at risk by depleting our strategic petroleum reserve, and proposed his budget with billions of taxpayer dollars on his radical Green New Deal priorities. House Republicans are united in calling on this administration to take necessary steps to unleash American energy dominance today. Energy independence is economic security, and we know it is national security. With me today are my colleagues who are leaders in the House Republican Conference on energy issues. I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Duncan, who serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Jeff.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the Whip for including me in this very important press conference today. As you know, tomorrow, Energy and Commerce will have a hearing with executives of major oil and gas companies. The Democrats who hold the majority here, they control who comes, and they're going to try to say that rising gas prices are the result of big oil price gouging. But let me be clear, nothing could be further from the truth. While the world is focused on the war in Ukraine, Americans really need to focus on the Biden war against American energy here at home. In fact, they are, because they're experiencing the repercussions of that every day, and that is the price at the pump. Joe Biden began increasing Americans' energy costs from day one. As you heard Elise say, he stopped the XL pipeline. He ended the oil and gas leases on federal land, both onshore and offshore. He's not holding or even planning another lease sale for offshore or onshore lease sales for oil and gas production. He green-lighted Vladimir Putin's Nord Stream 2. That's paying for the war in Ukraine for Vladimir Putin, and Vladimir Putin's laughing. At the same time, we learned that Vladimir Putin was possibly funding NGOs to stop fracking in this country so that we could not be energy independent. As a result, prices skyrocketed 81% since Biden's inauguration. The real issue at hand here is that America, the United States, is blessed with abundant natural resources. Unfortunately, we're cursed by liberal politicians who would rather harm American families by causing them to pay more at the pump because of these America Last energy policies pushed forward by the Biden administration. This isn't Putin's price hike. This is Biden's war on American energy. He did this from day one. Joe Biden did this from day one. It's past time to flip the switch and restart American energy production in order to give American families the relief that they deserve by producing here at home. And with that, I will yield to Congressman Lauren Boebert from Colorado.
Well, I think we are all seeing that the bill has come due for bad Democrat policies. There's not a single Democrat policy that I could point to and say, hey, this is really successful for American families, for moms and dads who are trying to put food on the table, trying to fill up their gas tank to go to work, for our children who have suffered in schools and out of schools, being kept out of schools. None of these policies are benefiting the American people. And now we are paying the price each and every day when our electric bill comes due, when we're paying for fuel at the gas pump. It's been 28 days since House Democrats passed the so-called ban on Russian oil. But guess what? We're still importing natural gas, and we're still funding the Kremlin. 100,000 barrels of oil, Russian oil, are being brought into our country, purchased $10 million a day. This is absolutely unjust, un-American. We are funding both sides of this war right now. We pat ourselves on the back because we gave aid to Ukraine, but are still giving $10 million a day to Russia. And it doesn't have to be this way. America makes the cleanest energy in the world. In fact, our natural gas is 42% cleaner than what Russian gas is. American innovation, in particular fracking, has allowed America to be the global leader in reducing emissions globally since 2000. We need to stop buying Russian oil and gas, stop begging OPEC, stop looking to Venezuela, stop looking to Iran, and rely on the American roughneck. No one does it better than we do. And these liberal politicians are regulating our communities and our country into poverty. This is a national security threat that is taking place right now. We are seeing what happens when you don't put American energy first. Democrats are hell-bent on their destroy America first policies. And sadly, the Biden regime has continued its all-out war on American energy production. Instead of supporting the Keystone XL pipeline, issuing new leases and energy production and expediting permits for pipelines and natural gas exports, Joe Biden just released a budget calling for $45 billion in new taxes on American energy producers. Now is not the time for that. President Trump's America First policies kept gas prices low and built the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Well, Biden's using it as his get-out-of-jail-free card. Joe Biden's Produce Energy Anywhere But America strategy has gas prices doubling and our strategic reserve being drained quicker than Americans' bank accounts. Colorado's West Slope used to have a booming energy economy. I remember because the Roughnecks used to come into my restaurant, and I was really happy to clean mud off of my floors because that meant things were booming. That meant that business was really good. And now many of our businesses have had to close their doors because of these liberal politicians that I mentioned who regulate unnecessarily our communities into poverty. Republicans know the answer to this energy crisis, and we know how to lower gas prices. We have policies to do exactly this. I have a discharge petition on the House floor to return to President Trump's energy policies, and every Republican should be on that discharge petition so we can push this to the floor for a vote. Demand a vote on this so we can get America energy independent again, pursue energy dominance, and drill, baby, drill. And now I'd like to turn it over to the whip, Steve Scalise.
Thank you, Lauren. Joe Biden's war on American energy didn't start when he took the oath of office as president. I want to take you back to one of the presidential debates when Joe Biden fittingly was standing to the left of Bernie Sanders. If you're looking at the TV, here's Bernie Sanders. To the left is Joe Biden. And by the way, the policies that Joe Biden espoused were also to the left of Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden said as a candidate, quote, "No more drilling on federal lands. No more drilling, including offshore. No ability for the oil and gas industry to continue to drill, period. It ends." That's what Joe Biden said about American energy as a candidate. And unfortunately, what we've seen since he became president of the United States was a constant barrage and attack on American energy. Started with the canceling of the Keystone Pipeline, which was thousands of American jobs, and a great partnership with our friend Canada. That oil was going to go somewhere. And we could have gotten that oil from Canada through a safe pipeline to America so that we wouldn't need to get oil from Russia. But Joe Biden said no. And it wasn't just Keystone. Joe Biden has not approved a single new pipeline in America since he's been president. And it's not that he's against all pipelines, as my colleagues have pointed out. He approved Russia's pipeline, the Nord Stream 2, which builds on top of the Nord Stream 1, which was already supplying Russian oil to parts of Europe. We could have been there to provide all of the oil and gas that Europe needs. And instead, Joe Biden turned off the spigots here and sent leverage to Putin, sent hundreds of millions of dollars a day to Putin to help fund this war in Ukraine. And when we look at gas prices, immediately as Joe Biden said no on federal lands, as he promised as a candidate, said no offshore to drilling, he then continued to attack through the regulatory agencies. Just about every regulatory agency out there is going after the ability for us to produce energy in America. And is it any surprise that not long after he did it, you saw prices starting to skyrocket? Not after Putin invaded Ukraine, but well before Putin invaded Ukraine, Joe Biden's attack on American energy had led to sticker shock at the pump. The pain at the pump is real. And by the way, it hits lowest income families the hardest. When Joe Biden just released his budget last week, he proposed another $45 billion in new taxes on oil and gas. That means families who are struggling already because of all the inflation, not just high gas prices, but inflation because of President Biden's massive trillions of dollars of spending here in Washington that's rising the cost of everything. He wants to now raise $45 billion in additional taxes on oil and gas. And by the way, unfortunately, the only promise I think he's kept is to go after American energy. He also promised that he wouldn't raise taxes on any American making less than $400,000 a year. Remember that promise? Joe Biden's broken that promise multiple times, and the latest of which is in his budget, because by proposing $45 billion in new taxes on oil and gas, the people that will pay that the most are low-income families, not the millionaires and the billionaires that he talks about in his speeches. He's going to be kicking in the gut with higher taxes those people making less than $50,000 a year. They're the ones that are going to get hit the hardest. Well, he talks about windmills and solar panels and electric cars. We're for all of the above energy. But go look at who's buying the electric cars right now. And by the way, if you bought an electric car today, you can't plug that into a tree. You've got to plug it into an electric outlet that gets power. And most of that power comes from fossil fuels, which Joe Biden continues to attack. So the record's clear. People get this. As Elise said, the American people are smarter than Joe Biden gives them credit for. They know it's Joe Biden's policies, anti-American energy policies, that have led to this skyrocketing sticker shock at the pump, where it costs over $150 in some cases to fill your car. It doesn't need to be this way. We can be lowering the cost of energy, not by raiding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which, by the way, the price today is above where it was when Joe Biden raided it yet again for the third time in his presidency. Let's open up American energy. Let's take power away from all the dictators of the world. Putin, whether it's Iran, Venezuela, stop begging dictators to produce our energy when we can produce it right here in America. By the way, cleaner than anywhere else in the world. You want to lower carbon emissions globally? Make more American energy. Make more products in America. Stop attacking American production and American workers. We're calling on Joe Biden to open up the spigots, and we're going to continue as Republicans to push for the policies that will open up American energy and lower the cost of gasoline at the pump. With that, we'll be happy to take some questions. Yeah.
So how do you guys plan to direct your questioning? What's your message to the oil executives tomorrow?
I'll let Jeff answer as well. I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, not on the subcommittee of jurisdiction, but they'll allow us to come on. And some of the questions I want to ask, because we've got a number of pieces of legislation. Energy and Commerce Republicans, led by Catherine McMorris Rodgers, have filed legislation that will allow us to produce more American energy and lower the price of gasoline. Last week, the Natural Resources Republicans filed a package of bills, 6 different bills, that will specifically reverse some of the Obama regulations that are crushing American energy. And so we're going to be promoting that legislation, but we're going to also be asking some of the myths that are out there, like the 9,000 permits that President Biden wants to talk about. Oil companies aren't sitting on those leases. In many cases, what we hear from them is that they can't produce the leases that they have because every federal regulatory agency is blocking their ability to actually go drill in America. So President Biden last week said, we're going to tax people more if they don't produce their wells, while his own agencies are blocking them from producing the wells. So isn't that ironic, where the Biden administration first blocks them from doing their job and then says they're going to fine them because they can't do their job? We're going to have those kind of conversations, and I'll let Jeff answer some of the questions he might bring up.
Yeah, thanks, Whip, and thanks for the question. Some of the questions that I heard in our ENC meeting this morning were just about that, the 9,000 permits that are out there. Want to ask the CEOs why they're not producing those and let them explain what Steve just said, but take it a little further. There are hundreds of permits that have to be garnered by the oil and gas companies from both federal and state agencies to run pipelines to get the product once it's produced from the well to the refinery. Transmission lines and all these things to produce a well. Plus, every lease that you buy, you're speculating. There's not water under every square inch of your yard, and there's not oil under every square inch of a lease cell. So they have to explore exploration cost and then production cost, and then getting that product to the refinery is very important. Another thing that I believe we'll hear is the Biden administration's using a lot of other agencies like the Security and Exchange Commission to target big oil. And what they're saying is you've got to show us your climate change or carbon footprint. If banks are making loans to pipeline companies, then the pipeline company they're loaning money to, because the SEC and the Federal Reserve are now requiring banks to find out what that pipeline's carbon footprint is. So they're using a lot of agencies to push their green initiative because they know they can't get it through Congress. As a non-starter here, they failed time and again. And it doesn't work for the American people. The American taxpayers are paying their hard-earned dollars for inflated grocery prices and inflated fuel prices at the pump. And we're hearing it. We're hearing it every day. If you think about this, the average 18-wheeler has 300-gallon diesel tank. And so for every dollar of fuel price increase, that's $300 added to what it takes to fill that trucker up as he's moving those goods across this country. That's $1,200, $1,500 a fill up if prices are $4, $5. That's a lot of money for that trucker. He's not paying it. His trucking company's not paying it. They're passing it on the consumer. And that fuel prices is related to the inflated prices of consumer goods across this country. So we're going to talk about a lot of those issues tomorrow. We're going to talk about increased production, what energy companies can do globally to increase production. Because in economics, you have supply and demand. And demand is high as the economy is coming back globally in the post-COVID era. Supplies, because of the failed Biden energy policies, supplies in the United States are down. We're producing about 1.5 million barrels less today than we did when he was inaugurated. Prices are up 81%. If you think about less production and greater demand just here at home, you kind of understand why these failed Biden American energy policies and this war on American energy are not working. That I'll yield back.
Quickly follow up. You mentioned the carbon footprint. I just wanted to know, it sounds like you're implying that it's wrong to ask for the carbon footprint. Are you implying that that's wrong or it's too heavily regulated? Why is this?
Well, here's the question that you ought to ask. Why is the SEC asking for this? Are there going to be penalties imposed? And that's questions we're asking. In fact, I would ask you guys to reach out to Andy Barr from Kentucky. He's been a leader on this issue for this conference on what the SEC and the Federal Reserve and others are doing with asking these ESG questions, right? So Garrett Graves is another great one that can talk about that. I hope tomorrow that a lot is shown on what it cost for American energy companies to lease property from the federal government, explore a well, establish that well, all the other permits involved, and what it takes to get the first drop of oil or natural gas from that wellhead to the market, both upstream, midstream, and downstream. That's upstream producers, midstream that are carrying those products to the market, and then the petroleum marketers that have to make a profit at the end of the day. And they're seeing fewer people show up at their gas stations because of fuel prices. More people are staying at home. It's costing moms and dads just to do the normal things of taking their kids to the ball game, taking their kids to school, traveling to work to earn the money that's going to pay for that fuel, and going to church to worship their God every Sunday. It's costing them more today, and it's wrong. We have, as I said earlier, we're blessed here in America with the natural resources that we have proven that we can produce and lessen the cost for American families and be a net exporter to help the quality of lives for so many people around the globe. That was proven under President Trump's term. That was killed on day one by Joe Biden, and American families are paying for it.
Yeah, and think about the financing. Joe Biden, through the SEC, ESG, they're trying to block financing to any oil and gas projects to make it harder for them to even get the funding to do it in America. So when you think about oil and gas production, Joe Biden is harder on American companies than he is on Putin. Go ask Joe Biden, when has he asked these questions of Putin when they're producing? They're producing oil too that's coming into America. Do they ask for the carbon footprint of it? Because I can tell you it's a lot higher than the carbon footprint of oil and gas made in America. There's no country that has the standards we have. So if you're concerned about carbon emissions, you should be wanting to produce more energy in America, not getting it from some of these dictators around the world who don't have our standards. Yeah.
What do you think of the $10 billion COVID relief deal negotiated by Mitt Romney in the Senate, and will Republican leadership support it when it eventually comes to the House?
We haven't seen the final details, nor how many other Republicans in the Senate, if they even have 60 votes to move it. One of the things we've been talking about is getting the economy open. The best way right now to get relief to families and small businesses is to open up all the economy, end all the mandates, all these things they're doing to make it harder for people to go back to work, trying to fire people if they don't get vaccinated. Let people get back to work. Let's open the economy again. That'll solve a lot of these problems. Yeah.
What's your reaction to Congressman Upton retiring, and do you think it says anything about the Republican Party given President Trump was working against his reelection?
I just saw that. Fred just made the announcement. Clearly, if you look, redistricting had a lot to do with that because we've got a few races across the country where two Republicans were pitted against each other. There in Michigan, the legislature drew Fred Upton in with Bill Huizenga, so you had two Republican members running against each other. And I think Fred said, look, he's had a long career, distinguished. He talked about things like 21st century cures, a bill I think that for generations to come will help cure more diseases. In fact, some of the reforms to FDA and 21st century cures were used by President Trump in Operation Warp Speed to find not one, not two, but 3 different vaccines for COVID. So, this was a decision he had to make looking at the dynamics of a member-on-member race. And it's unfortunate. We've got a few of them, like I said, around the country where it's Republican against Republican. But overall, I think you're going to see a wave of Republicans flipping seats that are currently held by Democrats to Republican, because I think the country's fed up with big government socialism.
Can I just add that Fred Upton will be missed? He's been a leader on Energy and Commerce Committee for so long, and 21st Century Cures came through that committee under Fred's leadership. He'll be missed.
Speak of the.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just saying that Fred Upton will be missed by conference and by Congress. He has been a real leader on energy and commerce. He has set some standards for us for Kathy to lead by. So he's going to be missed. At the same time, Bill Huizenga, we hated the fact that those two were drawn in because we're friends with both of them. So now it kind of frees Bill up to focus on his November race and get a Republican, get him back in that seat from Michigan. So I wanted to say that Fred would be missed.
Yeah, when you look at Fred's legacy, he's got a long list. 21st Century Cures is one I bring up just because I worked with him a lot on it, but he made that happen. That bill would not have become law, and there are a lot of other examples of that. Yes, sir.
One point that Democrats are also making regarding the energy companies is that they're making massive profits right now, and they should pass those savings on to the consumer. Chairman Jeffries said it's a matter of patriotism that they should do that. What's your response to that?
Well, it's not patriotic to shut off American energy. And one of the reasons that the prices are so high is because President Biden artificially limited the ability for America to produce energy. And what that means is we're a free market economy. And I think people maybe they don't recognize that when you look at oil production around the world, it's not a free market. OPEC is a cartel. It's a monopoly. And they want the price to be high. Russia wants the price to be high because Putin is using this windfall to finance his war against Ukraine. Joe Biden can take that pressure away. He can take that leverage that these other actors out there, not only dictators like Putin, but also cartels like OPEC. He can take away their leverage just by opening up American energy, because here, if you remove all the roadblocks from the Department of Energy, the Department of Interior, the EPA, the SEC, name your alphabet soup of acronyms, every one of those federal agencies is blocking American energy. If you unleash that, because we're a free market, people will produce and drill all around the country and the price will go down. There's no other country that produces energy that operates in a free market. And by shutting off American energy, Joe Biden has turned energy production over to cartels, monopolies, and dictators. That's what's killing American families. That's why the price is so high. We want the price to be lower by producing more in America. Thank you all.